Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Peters, Prosecutor Sneddon asked you questions about whether or not it's difficult for a teenaged young man to report molestation. Do you remember those questions?
Yes, I remember them.
You've had teenaged young men report to you that they've been improperly touched, have you not?
Yeah, on occasion, yeah.
What if you knew the particular teenaged young man that you were investigating had previously reported his mother for molesting him?
Your Honor, I'm going to object to that. That's an improper question. Assumes facts not in evidence.
He opened it up, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Would a prior history of allegations of molestation in a family suggest that children in the family have an easier time admitting they've been molested if they really have?
Same objection, Your Honor. Calls for a conclusion. No foundation.
Sustained.
When you interviewed Janet Arvizo on February 20, 2003, I believe you indicated you had looked into prior involvement with your agency and the Arvizo family, correct?
Your Honor, asked and answered.
He opened that issue up as well, Your Honor.
The objection is overruled.
You can answer the question. You said you had looked into their prior involvement with DCFS, right?
Yes, I did.
And were you aware that Davellin had previously accused her father of molesting her?
I was not aware of that.
Were you aware that Gavin had previously accused his mother of molesting him?
No, I was not.
Was that because you didn't have that computer system in the mid-90s?
Your Honor, I'm going to object and ask the court to admonish counsel. Please. Object. It's hearsay. It's improper. It's been asked and answered.
The objection as to vague on the last question is sustained.
Well, the prosecutor asked you hypothetically about the difficulty some teenaged young men have admitting they've been molested, right?
Yes, he did.
And you've indicated, in your experience, certain teenaged young men have admitted to you they've been molested, right?
Very few.
What if you learned there were other issues? Excuse me. If a child in a family, theoretically, has made allegations of molestation before, would that suggest that that particular child may have an easier time admitting molestation if it really happens?
Your Honor, I'm going to object as an improper hypothetical. Assumes facts not in evidence.
Sustained.
Now, you indicated that you used words that you're not a specialist. Remember that?
Yes.
And what did you mean by specialist?
We do have a unit that deals with sexual abuse only.
But certainly with 30 years of experience, you've
Yeah.
You've gotten a lot of training.
A lot of sexual abuse cases.
In cases of sexual abuse?
Yeah. There are indicators in sexual abuse, yes.
What indicators are you talking about?
I usually look at how they disclose the information to me, if they're withdrawn, or they may be reluctant to answer any of my questions. The relationship that they had with the interaction they had with their mother. Gavin appeared to be very open, eager to talk. He didn't seem at any point uncomfortable when I asked a question.
And isn't it correct that Gavin showed no indication of having been sexually abused when you interviewed him?
My observation at the time, when I interviewed them on that particular day, which was February 20th, he showed no indication of any signs of any sexual molestation.
And would you say the same about Star, after you interviewed Star?
Star, also.
He also showed no indication of having been sexually abused, right?
No, he did not.
Okay, now, the prosecutor asked you questions about the Bashir documentary, but you knew that in the Bashir documentary Mr. Jackson expressly denied any sexual contact with children, right?
Object. Leading.
Overruled.
Did you know that?
Can I answer that?
Yes.
Say it again.
Were you aware that, in the Bashir documentary, Mr. Jackson denied any sexual contact with children?
Yes.
And the prosecutor asked you questions about Mr. Jackson admitting sleeping with boys, but Mr. Jackson admitted letting children into his bedroom, correct?
The question that posed to the children was, have you ever slept in the bed with Michael Jackson?
Right. What did they say?
That's the question that I asked.
What did they say?
They said, no, because that was the allegations that was on the referral, so I went verbatim.
But they did admit sleeping in his bedroom, correct?
They did admit that they have slept in the bed and in the bedroom.
In Mr. Jackson's bed in Mr. Jackson's bedroom, right?
Yes. And they said if he was there, he would sleep on the floor. They told me about an incident where he slept on the floor and a blanket and something.
The prosecutor asked you about Janet Arvizo being a welfare mother. Do you remember that question?
Yes, I do.
Do you know whether or not she was a fraudulent welfare mother?
Your Honor, I'm going to object to that question. It's argumentative and it calls for a legal conclusion.
Sustained.
When you interviewed Janet Arvizo and the children at Major J. Jackson's home, did you determine whether or not Major Jackson was supporting Janet Arvizo and her children?
Object. Calls for a conclusion. Lack of foundation.
Overruled. You may answer.
I never had any contact with Major Jackson. I think my supervisor did have occasion to speak to him, and from what she told me is that he said he was paying for the tutoring.
But you did believe at the time you interviewed Janet that she and the family were living at least part of the week at J. Jackson's home, right?
Yes, that's where I thought they resided.
Did you investigate whether or not she was putting any welfare money into his bank accounts?
You know, we don't deal with welfare.
Okay. Did you actually investigate her financial condition at all?
Based on the information that she gave me, and I did know that she was on welfare, and we do have access to whether or not they are receiving public assistance or not. The actual amount of it is based on the children, how many children you have, and yourself. And that was, I think she told me it was $700, and I think that's pretty accurate for a family of 4.
But you don't do any investigation into whether that's being lawfully received, right?
No, it's 2 different departments. One is the Department of Public Social Services, which deals with welfare, and aid to families with dependent children it was called, and now it's called CalWorks. It's 2 different departments.
You didn't investigate her history of any prior litigation, did you?
No, I did not.
Did you ever hear of a suit against J.C. Penney?
Your Honor, I object. Calls for hearsay.
Sustained.
Did you ask her whether or not she was raising money from various celebrities at the time for personal use?
No, I didn't. But when I looked at the prior allegations of 2001, I think it was, she did make mention of knowing certain people and that she was friends of Michael Jackson. Her children went out to Neverland. She did say that in the other referral from the other social worker who interviewed her, which was almost 2 years prior to this allegation that we're speaking of right now.
Excuse me. I move to strike as non-responsive to the question.
Stricken.
Everything beyond, no.
The only. I'll leave in the part about, no, I didn't. Strike the voluntary statement.
But didn't Ms. Arvizo tell you at the time that she had been obtaining money or financial benefits from celebrities?
Object. Asked and answered.
Sustained.
Did you determine how much Major Jackson was making at the time?
Object as immaterial.
Sustained.
Would it be correct to say that in terms of your investigation, limiting it to what you do in your job, do you let me rephrase that. Did you just take her word for it, I'm getting welfare, or did you look further?
I knew she was getting welfare, because it shows up on our system.
But you didn't know whether or not she was getting it in a lawful way, correct?
I don't know.
Object. Asked and answered and
Sustained.
And assumes facts not in evidence and calls for a legal conclusion.
I already ruled.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Apologize.
Go ahead.
You said. The prosecutor asked you questions about these big guys who were at Major Jackson's apartment. Okay. And you indicated that Janet told you she was being hassled by the media, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Did you ever ask her why these security guards were there?
She said for support.
Okay. Did she ever complain about them to you?
No, she did not.
Okay. Did she ever suggest to you in any way they were a threat to her?
No, she did not.
Did any of her children ever suggest to you that these security guards were a threat to them?
No, she did not.
Alright, now, the prosecutor asked you questions about whether or not you've seen security guards before when you've done your interviews, right?
Right.
And you said something about you've seen security people at various locations before when you interviewed. Is that correct?
What I meant by that is that when you're going into a home, there may be several people there that are not identified. Being that I do investigate a lot of law enforcement people and things like that, I've had occasions where there were other police officers there. Yeah.
Now, your unit deals with high-profile type investigations, right?
Yes, they do.
And your unit obviously would investigate celebrities if referrals were made.
Yes, we do.
Correct? And in your experience, are you aware that celebrities often have security people?
Yes. I'm aware of it, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And in your experience, would it be unusual for a celebrity the stature of Michael Jackson to need security?
No.
Now, the prosecutor also asked you a question about all these people being there when you did the interview, and I think you said that it's your policy that other people can be present if the person you're interviewing permits it?
Yes.
Are there any restrictions on that at all?
We try to interview kids separately, but if the parents refuse, we allow it. We try to interview them separately.
And I believe you said that Janet was concerned about your interview with she and the children being kept confidential, right?
Yes, she was.
Did Janet ever tell you that you were being recorded?
No, she didn't.
Did she ever tell you she knew you were being recorded?
No, she didn't.
Now, were the security people, let me rephrase that. Were the people that you thought were security people in the room when you did the interview?
No.
Do you know where they were?
Outside.
To get outside, would they have to go down a stairway?
They would go out, yeah, they have to go out of the building.
And did you ask if they would leave the building while you conducted the interview?
Yes, we did.
Have you ever met Major J. Jackson at any time?
No, I didn't. No.
Have you ever spoken to him at any time?
No, I did not.
Okay. Did your investigation involve any check into Major J. Jackson's background?
No. They're making an allegation. And when there's an allegation, we go for the perpetrator. And the perpetrator of this particular allegation was the mother, Janet Arvizo.
Okay. But in your investigation as to whether or not there is any type of general neglect, would you look into who the mother was staying with or living with?
That's taken into consideration. Yes, but he was not on the allegation. I was there to check to see whether or not in fact, the allegations was against the mother. It was not against Major Jackson. It was against the mother, if she was providing adequate care for the children. So, for instance, hypothetically, if you're in a home and there may be someone that is kind of risky, and I know that, yes, I would talk to that person. Yes, I would. Any other person that's living in the home. But I was under the impression that she was just using his home there because she was hiding from the media and her home being the address in East Los Angeles, and that's where I had to do the interview.
Did the fact that she told you that she was hiding from the media suggest to you she might need security?
Yes.
Did the fact that she was hiding from the media suggest that maybe she asked Mr. Jackson would he help her with some security?
Yes.
I'm going to object. Calls for speculation.
Sustained.
Now, on April 1, 2003, again, you saw the Arvizo family at the Fatburger, right?
Yes.
And Janet told you that her kids were being tutored, right?
Yes, she did.
And she pointed to you and showed you where the tutoring office was, right?
Yes, she did.
You saw that on the second level, right?
Yes, I did.
And that was JGI tutoring, was it not?
I believe so, yeah.
And do you know what it costs to have a child tutored at JGI tutoring?
I can speculate. I don't know.
It's pretty expensive, isn't it?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'm going to object. She answered the question, she'd have to speculate. Move to strike the question, and it's also irrelevant.
The objection is sustained. The answer is stricken.
Was it your understanding? It's JEI. I made a mistake. That JEI tutoring is a private organization?
I do believe that as a private organization, yes.
And was it your understanding that they provide after-school care?
At JEI?
Yes.
I'm not aware of that, no.
Did Janet tell you who was paying for it?
Major Jackson, I think. Yeah.
Now, I believe you said that Janet told you that she could go into Mr. Jackson's room any time she wanted, right?
Yes, she did.
Was it words to that effect?
Words to that effect. Yeah. She said she was up all around, all the time, and
And did she tell you whether or not Mr. Jackson had a lock on his door to his bedroom?
she said no lock.
Okay.
She said it was an open room.
Okay. So she said it was open for her to go in and out as she chose?
That's what she told me. Yeah.
Okay.
That's what I visualized as she was speaking.
And she told you she would do that any time of night?
Yes.
Now, was that the same conversation where you learned that Gavin had slept on Mr. Jackson's bed? Let me rephrase that. I didn't ask a good question.
Okay.
Janet was sitting there when Gavin told you, I have slept on Mr. Jackson's bed, right?
Yeah. Janet, the mother, yes. Yes.
That was the same, and Janet heard Gavin say that to you, right?
Yes, she did.
She never made any objection to that statement?
No, she did not.
Never made any objection to that happening?
No, she did not.
Okay, but what she said to you is, but I can go in and out and see what's going on, right?
Yes, she did.
Alright, did Star suggest that he had spent evenings in Mr. Jackson's room?
Yes, he did.
And did he also deny that anything improper ever happened?
He denied anything ever happened.
I'm going to object as asked and answered.
Sustained.
Now, the prosecutor asked you if Janet had said things were horrible at Neverland when you bumped into her on April 1st, right?
Right.
And you said she never said that, right?
No, she did not say that.
When you bumped into Janet and the kids on April 1st, did they ever tell you anything about child molestation by Michael Jackson?
No, they didn't.
Now, Davellin told you that she had a girlfriend at Neverland, is that right?
Yes, she did.
Did she ever mention the name Marie Nicole? Do you know?
I can't remember the name.
How about Simone? Did she ever mention the name Simone to you?
Maybe.
Does that sound?
I'm not really sure. That's catchy, so maybe. Simone, yeah.
You indicated that the counselor at school informed you that homework was being sent to the Arvizos for the children, right?
Yes, she did.
And what did you take that to mean? Excuse me, let me rephrase. You learned that from a counselor at school, right?
Yes.
The counselor told you that they hadn't been attending school, but homework is being sent to them, is that correct?
The mother was constantly in contact with them.
And that's what the counselor said?
Yes, she did. Uh-huh.
Did you discuss that fact with Janet Arvizo when you interviewed her?
Yes, I asked them about the homework. How was school going? And she said that she was giving homework and sending the work in. So I don't know over what period of time we were talking about, if it was 1 week, 2 weeks. But at the particular time when I went to the school, it was fresh. So the 14th was the day we actually got the the referral. I went to the school, about 3 days, about the 18th of February. So I'm thinking the time span might have been a week or maybe 2 weeks that they were getting homework sent to them.
And did the counselor appear to you to be satisfied that this process of sending homework to the Arvizos was working?
Yeah, she did.
And did the counselor inform you that the homework was being done?
I don't remember that part of it. What I do remember is that she did confirm that they were getting homework, and that's, as I said earlier, previously, that's how I was aware of where she was, because I had no idea of her location. Even though I had gone to the address on St. Andrews, I did not have another address for her. It was really coincidental or by luck that I found that out, because I was sitting at the school, because I did go to the school, and that was one of our collateral contacts that we do is go to the schools, and found out they were not in the school and she called on the phone.
Object as a narrative and non-responsive beyond the first sentence.
Sustained.
Let me go through this a little bit. You mentioned the word collateral contact, right? Is that correct?
Right.
What is a collateral contact?
That's when I go and talk to someone else about the situation. And I didn't read the referral to the school or anything. I just asked was she in contact with those kids and did they attend that school, and she told me they did.
Alright, now, when you're investigating someone for an allegation of general neglect,
Right.
do you often take the time to go to the child's school?
A lot of times, yes, we do.
Why do you do that?
Depends on what the allegations are. If they're not attending school for any period of time, for sure we go to the school. That's a given.
If you find that a child is not attending school and not getting their homework done somewhere else, might that be an indication of general neglect?
Not getting their homework done, no. I mean, we have a lot of those cases of children not doing their homework. But if they're not attending school, it becomes a serious problem. They go to the Student Attendance Review Board, and we are notified of that, Department of Children and Family Services.
In the case of Janet Arvizo, you've indicated that, based on your investigation, you found that she was raising her kids properly?
Properly.
And your findings are limited to the investigation you did, right?
Right.
And that investigation included going to the school, right?
I did.
Did what you learned from the counselor at the school affect your findings?
Yes, it did.
How so?
That she was taking care of her kids, making sure they were getting their homework, and that she was not neglecting them in any way in terms of their education.
Okay, no further questions.
This will be short, I promise you.
Sure.
I promise everybody, actually. The first question. Mr. Mesereau asked you about your conversation with Davellin and about the girlfriend, okay?
Okay.
It's true, is it not, that in your report, what Davellin says was, most of the time I take a girlfriend with me to keep me company. We stay in a room down the hall in the main house, correct? Is that what your report reflects?
That's what the report says.
So she would take somebody with her, not that she would meet somebody there?
No, she told me she would take someone with her.
Okay.
For company, yes.
Okay. Now, Mr. Mesereau asked you some questions about your experience with child abuse cases, child sexual abuse cases.
Right.
And you indicated a few of the things that you, based on your training, saw as indicators of child abuse, correct?
A few of the things, yes.
A few of them.
Not all of them.
Alright, and that's what I want to just ask you, if some of these are the one of the ones you recognize.
Alright.
Now, most of the time when you're doing some kind of an interview in this kind of a setting where you go to a home or to a school, the allegations involve somebody who is in a position of trust with the child, correct?
What did you say?
Yes. There are two basic situations in which you can have a sexual assault on a child. They could be picked up off the street by a stranger and taken somewhere and molested. That's one way, correct?
Right.
And another way is where an allegation comes in where it is somebody who is a family friend, or a stepfather, or a brother, or somebody like that. It's somebody who's in a position of trust with that child, correct?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And the indicators for the latter situation, that's what I want to talk about, somebody in a position of trust, okay? Do they tell you when, in your training, that one of the indicators that you look for somebody who would take advantage of a child is that the child is from a broken home?
That's one of the indicators, yes.
And did they also tell you that another indicator was that there's no father figure in the family?
That can be one of the indicators, yes.
And both of those indicators were present in this case, correct?
Objection. Misstates the evidence.
Overruled. You may answer.
No father in the home and you said.
Broken home?
Broken home. I mean, we have a lot of those cases. No father in the home. No, broken home. I mean, that's America.
Those are some of the indicators you looked for, correct?
That's one of the indicators, yes. Yes.
Along with some of the other stuff you mentioned?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. No further questions.
Very briefly, did you determine whether or not Major J. Jackson was a father figure in this family?
They seemed to think highly of him. I think they were involved in the Navy SEALs. They did a lot of extracurricular activities. And
With Major J. Jackson?
No, the children did. But I think, if I can recall, one of the children was involved in the Navy SEALs.
And did Ms. Arvizo tell you that Major J. Jackson was very involved with her children?
Yes, she did. She spoke very highly of him, yes.
Did she tell you they were living a good portion of the week at his home?
Yeah, they spent a lot of time there, yes.
And did she tell you that Major Jackson was spending a lot of time with her children?
Yes. You know what? When I went there, I'm going to assume that he was not in the United States or somewhere else, like on duty.
Did she tell you that she met Major J. Jackson through a SEALs program?
Yes, she did.
Did she tell you her children were involved with Major J. Jackson in that program?
Yes, she did.
Did you conclude that Major Jackson was a father figure to the Arvizo children?
Since I didn't meet him, I didn't have a chance to observe, their interactions or really speak to him about their relationship, so I think it would be unfair for me to make that conclusion.
But certainly, based on what you heard of Janet Arvizo's relationship with Major J. Jackson.
Oh, yeah, she spoke very highly of him, perhaps a father figure.
Didn't sound like a broken home?
Oh, no, didn't sound like a broken home, no.
Thank you.
Nothing further.
All right, thank you. You may step down.
Thank you.
Call your next witness, please.
We'll call Karen Walker.
Come forward, please. When you get to the witness stand, remain standing. Face the clerk over here and raise your right hand.
I do.
Please be seated. State and spell your name for the record.
Karen Walker. Karen. Last name, Walker.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Miss Walker. The first thing I want to ask you to do is try and talk into that microphone that's on your right side. Kind of lean into it. Everybody has the problem of not being able to get close enough to it.
Okay.
So if you could do that. Thank you. Now, how are you employed?
I work for Department of Children and Family Services. I supervise children's social workers.
What county do you work for?
Los Angeles County.
All right, you just saw Miss Peters leave here, is that correct?
Yes.
Do you know her, by any chance?
Yes. I'm her supervisor.
All right, how long have you worked for the Department of Children and Family Services?
Almost 13 years.
Okay, what's your educational background?
I have my bachelor's in English and my master's in counseling psychology.
All right, do you have any licenses or certificates?
Certificates from in-service trainings that I've attended and through the department. But I don't have my LCSW or my MFCC.
And those 2 series of letters that you just rattled off there, those are licenses for people to counsel in private practice, is that right?
Yes.
So if you decided to retire someday and you wanted to open a counseling practice, you would have to get a license of that sort, is that correct?
Right. You'd have to do hours and then get your license.
All right, for the work that you do not need to have that counseling license, is that correct?
No.
Now, you indicated that you have some in-service certificates. Can you tell us what that is about?
Parenting certificates. Sexual abuse in service trainings. The department has several trainings that they give throughout the year, and you can sign up and attend those trainings.
All right, have you been doing that over the years that you've been there?
Yes.
And were you employed in the same capacity in February of 2003?
Yes.
All right, now, at some point. Let me ask you this. You said that you're, I believe, a special unit supervisor, is that correct?
I have the sensitive cases unit and medical placement unit.
And briefly explain to us what the sensitive cases unit is.
The sensitive cases unit goes out and investigates allegations of child abuse, neglect, exploitation of children whose parents work for Department of Children and Family Services, Los Angeles Police Department patrol officers, Sheriff's Department patrol officers, and high-profile persons and celebrities.
All right, you mentioned another unit.
Medical placement.
Medical placement. All right, That has nothing to do with this case, is that correct?
No.
So we'll not ask about that. In your capacity as a supervisor of the special unit, did you have occasion to become involved in an investigation in February of 2003 involving the Arvizo family?
Yes.
Alright, can you tell me what your first contact was in that regard?
Laverne called me on the telephone when the referral came in, and I believe it was Valentine's Day, and she and another social worker were going to the home because they got a referral called in, and they were going to go and investigate. And they weren't able to locate the family. So then the following week, which I believe was February 20th, we had a better idea and a location, because Laverne had spoken to the mother, and we went to the address and got the correct apartment number.
So the first day that any activity occurred in your office that you're aware of was February the 14th?
Right.
And then February 20th, you say, we went to a location.
Yes.
That is the first time you actually got physically involved in doing something on the case, is that right?
Yes.
Alright, and why was it that you accompanied the other social workers, or, do we say, social workers?
Uh-huh.
Yes. Okay. Why was it that you accompanied the other social workers to go on this particular visit?
My assistant regional administrator, Brenda Blackburn, thought that it would be a good idea for me to accompany Laverne and Jackie.
Okay, and what are the last names of Laverne and Jackie?
Laverne's last name is Peters, and Jacqueline's last name is Bowen.
Alright, so Miss Peters and Miss Bowen were really supposed to use last names in court, so.
Okay.
It's not absolutely insisted upon, I suppose, but we try to do that. Alright, so you went out there with Miss Peters and Miss Bowen, correct?
Yes.
And where did you go?
To the location where the Arvizo family was living.
Is that St. Andrew's Place?
Yes.
What part of town is that in?
Mid-Wilshire area.
Alright, and did you have any other people with you, law enforcement officers or other staff people?
No.
Alright, so the three of you traveled out there. Did you meet or did you go in one car?
We all went in one car.
So you arrived there at the same time, I would assume?
Yes.
Alright, what did you observe when you went into the residence?
Do you mean inside, upstairs?
What's the first thing that happened? Somebody answered the door, I suppose. Tell us about that.
The mother answered the door, and from Peters, Bowen and myself, we walked in. We introduced ourselves, and she introduced us to the children, and everybody gave us a hug, and then we met the other people that were also there in the apartment.
Alright, now, were you the person designated to do the interview?
No, Laverne was going to do the interview.
So that's Miss Peters?
Yes, I'm sorry, Miss Peters.
That's all right. So Miss Peters, it was her case, as it were?
Uh-huh.
You have to. I'm sorry. We'll get all these rules straight. You have to say, yes, or, no.
Oh, yes.
For the court reporter, it's really hard to get the others down.
She was the assigned social worker too.
So what happens, if you go along as a supervisor, you're not there to usurp the assigned social worker's duties, is that correct?
Correct.
And you mentioned that you had been asked by Brenda Blackburn to go with Miss Peters on this interview. Is that a usual occurrence, that you go out in the field with various people every day, or is this more unusual?
I'm usually not in the field. I'm usually in the office. Every now and then I do go out on a referral with a worker if it's getting late or it's before daylight savings time and they have to go to Lancaster or Palmdale. And depending on what kind of referral it is, sometimes I will go out with them.
So sometimes you'll just go as backup, as it were.
Right.
Okay, now, prior to your becoming a supervisor, did you go out in the field and do interviews yourself?
All the time.
How many years did you do interviews on a regular basis?
7.
Alright, can you estimate the number of interviews of this sort that you did? In other words, initial interviews to go out and assess the situation?
At least 2 or 3 a week.
2 or 3 a week for 7 years.
Nods head up and down.
Alright, and I know you were saying, yes, I think, by shaking your head.
Yes, I'm sorry.
That's alright. You'll get the rules all straight just as we finish.
Okay.
Happens to everybody. Don't worry about it. Alright, now, you said you went to the door and you mentioned that the Arvizos gave everybody a hug?
Uh-huh.
In your experience, was that unusual to go investigate a situation on a family and have everybody come up and give you a hug?
Yes.
What was their attitude towards you and your coworkers, Miss Peters and Miss Bowen?
Very engaging. Very nice. Very warm. Very friendly.
After the hugs and the greeting was accomplished with the Arvizos, I think you said you noticed there were some other people in the room?
Yes.
Do you recall who they were?
I believe one of them, they told us, worked for Mr. Jackson. The other one was a young lady, and I believe her name was Asha, and her son.
Alright, do you know if Asha and her son had any relationship to anybody else in particular?
Asha's son's father is Chris Tucker.
Okay, and was Asha, what was her demeanor during the time she was there?
She was very nice and very friendly.
And she was friendly to you, is that correct?
Yes.
Was she also friendly to the Arvizos?
Yes, they seemed very close.
The Arvizos seemed to be close to her, in other words.
Yes.
Both ways.
Yes.
Alright, now, you mentioned another person being there. I don't know if you said male. I think you said male, is that correct?
Male.
Can you describe the male who was there?
Maybe 5'9", 5'10", kind of a medium build, and he was Caucasian.
Alright, and what was his demeanor?
Really kind of nondescript. I mean, we really didn't have much interaction with him.
Was he unpleasant?
No.
Okay, so you didn't have enough interaction to really gauge.
Formulate an opinion, no.
Formulate an opinion, there you go. Was there anybody else in the room that you can recall?
No.
Alright, after you made these observations, you got the hugs, you made the observations of these people. What happened next, to your recollection?
We all sat on the couch, and Mrs. Ventura proceeded to put in a videotape.
Alright, now, you called her Mrs. Ventura. The name that she was going by at that time was Janet Ventura?
Yes.
Did you understand that she was also Janet Arvizo?
Well, I knew the children's last name was Arvizo, but on the referral, it said, Janet Ventura.
That's fine. So you knew that you were dealing with the Arvizo children?
And their mother.
And their mother?
Yes.
And Janet Ventura was their mother, right?
Yes.
What did you understand about the location of your meeting? Was it their house, somebody else's house?
It was someone else's house that they were staying in. Apartment.
Do you know whose house it was?
Yes. His name is Major Jackson.
And who told you that Major Jackson lived there?
Mrs. Ventura.
Alright, did she refer to him as Major Jackson?
Yes.
Did you understand what he was a major in?
The military.
Okay.
But I'm not sure.
Not sure which branch.
Right.
But you understood that that was a rank and he was.
Yes.
She was telling you he's a major in the military?
Yes.
Some branch of the military?
Yes.
Alright, what was your understanding about where Mr. Jackson, or Major Jackson, was at the time you were doing the interview?
Out of town.
Was he? Did you have any understanding as to whether or not he was out of town for an extended period of time, or that day, or for an hour?
I think maybe on the base.
Okay, so he was at work?
Right.
Okay, now, you said the next thing that happened was they put a tape into a machine, or Janet Ventura put a tape into a machine. Is that correct?
Yes.
Do you remember if it was a tape or a DVD or?
No, I think it was a cassette, but I'm not sure.
Something that you could put in a television and it will play?
Yes.
Alright, and what did she tell you about that, if anything?
I believe she said that this was a tape that Mr. Jackson had given to her son.
And did you feel, well, let me withdraw that. Was this an unusual way to start your interview process?
Yes.
Alright, and did you object, or did you sit back and watch it?
No, we sat down and we watched the tape.
Alright, and do you recall what the tape was about?
It was of Gavin Arvizo and Mr. Jackson, I believe at his home, outside by a lake, watching swans swimming, climbing a tree.
Okay, and was there music to this video?
I can't remember.
Alright, did it appear to be a professional production of some sort? In other words, somebody
taping?
Somebody holding a video camera, if you could tell?
I really couldn't tell.
Alright, when the tape was over, was there any talking during the tape? Any discussion in the room while the tape was playing?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay, so the tape was over. And what happened after the tape was over?
I told Asha and the other gentlemen there that, for confidentiality reasons, they were going to have to leave the apartment, because we needed to discuss some things with Mrs. Ventura.
Okay, did Janet Arvizo object to that?
She said that Asha was like family, and, she could hear anything. And she said that the other gentleman that was there, was welcome to stay as well. And so I kind of reiterated to her that, for purposes of confidentiality, that they really needed to leave before we discussed anything pertaining to the case.
Now, as far as your policy in your office is concerned, was it necessary to make them leave? In other words, if Miss Arvizo said, I absolutely insist that they stay or I won't talk to you, would you have gone ahead and talked to her in the presence of other people?
Probably we would have, yes.
Alright, but your goal is to clear the room, basically, so you can have a one-on-one conversation with the various people you're supposed to talk to, is that correct?
Exactly.
And when we say, one-on-one, ideally you would talk to each family member independently, too, is that correct?
Yes.
Did you make an effort to do that?
Yes.
And what happened when an effort was made to talk to family members one-on-one?
Mrs. Arvizo wanted us all in the same room together.
And did she insist on that?
Yes.
Alright, now, as far as the other people leaving, did they, in fact, leave?
Yes.
Alright, and they left without incident, I take it?
Yes.
Alright, now, during the time that these people were leaving, that being Miss Pryor and her son and the other gentleman you described, do you recall if Miss Peters did anything?
While they were leaving?
Yeah, did she take Miss Ventura into another room?
I believe she took her into the bedroom for a moment.
Okay, and while she took her into the bedroom, did you make an effort, are you or the other worker, Miss Bowen, make an effort to talk to any of the children?
No.
Alright, what happened after that? Miss Peters goes into the bedroom with Janet Ventura. You're out there with the children, is that right?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
The door was open. She came back out, and we all proceeded to sit around the table.
Alright, now, what was the attitude of the children during this interview process? Were they cooperative or?
Very.
Incooperative?
Very cooperative.
Did they appear to be reluctant to talk?
No, not at all.
Did they appear to be hiding anything?
No.
And what was Janet Ventura's attitude during this process?
She was very compliant and very cooperative.
Alright, by the way, the male that you referred to, do you recall any discussion about what that person's role was?
I believe that she said because of all the media attention and after the airing of the Martin Bashir videotape, that he was there, I guess, for protection for them from media, and also, I guess, driving them back and forth to Mr. Jackson's residence.
Alright, and did that individual appear? I asked you about his attitude or some word to that effect, his demeanor, but did he appear to be a menacing type of person, or how would you describe him?
No, not somebody that I would be afraid of, no.
Now, when the interview commenced with everybody there, do you recall what Janet Arvizo said about Michael Jackson, if anything?
That he was like a father to her children, and that he was a wonderful man. That you can't believe. She couldn't believe that after showing the tape, that people would come to, conclusions and make allegations.
Now, she's saying these things in the presence of the other family members, the 3 children, correct?
Yes.
What did the 3 children say about Michael Jackson, the best of your recollection?
That he was like a father to them. They were very close to him. That he could be a disciplinarian, like if they got out of hand, and they felt very close to him.
Did the children just parrot the same words, or did they tell different stories, or can you describe how they interacted?
I believe that, well, no, I mean, they all said the same thing in terms of him being like a father to them. But then, Gavin Arvizo said that, he felt that he had gotten better because of him. Star Arvizo said that everybody thinks that Michael Jackson has a quiet voice, but he can get loud at times. And I don't really remember anything else that Davellin Arvizo had to say, other than he was really nice, and she enjoyed spending time at his home.
Do you remember if Davellin said anything to you about Mr. Jackson's interaction with Gavin while Gavin was sick?
I don't remember.
Do you remember if any of them talked to you about Mr. Jackson helping Gavin while he was sick?
Being somebody that they felt had helped Gavin with his illness, because it was Gavin's wish to meet Mr. Jackson.
Do you remember which of the 3 children said that, or did they all say it, or 2 of the 3?
No, I don't remember.
Okay, now, one of the advantages of being a supervisor is that you don't usually have to write reports yourself, is that correct, in these situations?
Right.
Alright, I said that in a somewhat humorous fashion. But who was designated to write the report in this case?
Irene Peters.
So Miss Peters is going to write the report. You're there to observe, assist, back up, do whatever is necessary, is that right?
Right.
Do you recall any of the children talking about their biological father?
No, but I believe Mrs. Ventura said that they were separated, and that she had a restraining order against her husband.
Do you recall anything else that she said about her ex-husband?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay, now, about how long did this interview last?
Probably a little over an hour.
Alright, so you're remembering, the best you can, the parts of it you can recall, is that correct?
Yes.
You're not purporting to be able to tell us everything that was said by everybody there, are you?
No.
Alright, do you remember talking to Janet or Janet talking to you about Gavin's experiences at school since a certain television show was aired?
He was not going to school. She had gone to school to pick a book up for he and Star.
Did she explain, you're familiar with the Bashir video or television show, is that right?
Yes.
Vague as to time. Object.
Sustained.
Alright, well, as of right now, you know what I'm talking about if I say the Bashir television show about Michael Jackson.
Yes.
Alright, when did you first become aware of that show?
When it was on television.
Did you see it when it actually aired on TV?
Part of it.
Okay, and then was there a lot of news coverage both in print and on television about that show?
Yes.
Did you see any of that at the time?
Not really.
You were just aware of it in general? So
Yes.
By the time you had this interview, had you actually seen the entire Bashir television show?
No.
Had you seen the portions of it that pertained to Gavin Arvizo and Mr. Jackson?
Yes.
Alright, now, did Miss Arvizo talk about the affect that this television show had on Gavin's ability to go to school?
Yes.
What did she tell you about that?
That he was being teased at school and that's pretty much it.
And did she tell you that? Did she tell you whether or not she had signed a release for Gavin to appear in the Bashir television show?
No.
Did she talk about that at all?
I believe she said that she wasn't aware that it was going to be shown on television.
And what was your understanding?
Excuse me, Your Honor, I'm going to object to the question as to what point in time are we talking about now. Vague as to time.
Overruled. Next question.
Thank you. At that time, when we're talking about the interview on the 20th.
Yes.
Alright, just so I'm not confused. Okay, and during the interview on the 20th, was Janet concerned about not receiving compensation from that Bashir program?
Not that I know of.
Did she discuss that directly with you?
Compensation for the
Yes.
video?
Yes.
No.
Did she say anything to you at any time that suggested during that interview on the 20th that Mr. Jackson had done anything wrong with regard to that video?
No.
Was she seemed to be irritated about the video for some reason. Is that safe to say?
Calls for a conclusion, Your Honor. Object.
Overruled. You may answer.
Would you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
Let me ask a different question, even though the judge said it was okay. Let me clarify it. She had expressed some concern to you about the video and the effect it had on Gavin and the family, right?
The media attention.
Alright, there you go. And did she ask you for advice as to what she could do about the media attention?
I believe she was speaking to Miss Peters about that she didn't sign a release, and, I don't know if this actually was on the 20th or if this was a phone call.
Alright, so you're saying this, which is intriguing, but can you remember her saying any more on the 20th, before we get to a phone call?
No.
Do you remember whether or not on the 20th you suggested that she see a lawyer about problems she was describing?
No, I think that probably was in a phone call. And we weren't able to give legal advice. And if she wanted legal advice, then she should probably seek the aid of an attorney.
Alright, then let's go to the phone call here in just a minute. Before we do you recall any other discussion that stands out in your mind during the course of this hour-long interview with this family?
In terms of?
Well, first, I can ask some categories. First of all, did anybody say anything negative about Michael Jackson during that interview?
No.
Did anybody accuse Mr. Jackson of doing anything unlawful, illegal, or improper to anybody in the Arvizo family?
No. And when we went to do the investigation, the referral was in the mother's name, Mrs. Ventura's name, which was for general neglect. And then the allegations against Mr. Jackson, if anybody would have said anything happened or was inappropriate, then immediately our conversation is terminated and we call the police, because it becomes a criminal matter.
You would refer it to the police?
Yes.
Now, when you do these investigations, you're not, putting your hands over your ears to not hear evidence of a crime, right? In other words, if you're doing an investigation and somebody said there was a child molest that occurred and the person who did it was a third party, you want to hear that. I mean, you want to make sure you get that information, correct?
Absolutely.
Alright, and then you refer it to the police?
Yes.
Alright, and you heard nothing whatsoever that suggested that there was a child molest that had occurred?
No.
And part of the neglect allegations were to the effect that Janet Arvizo was allowing her children to be put in a situation where they were subject to inappropriate contact. Is that right?
Yes. And failure to protect, yes.
So while your interview was focusing on Janet Arvizo, you certainly had in mind that if there was anything that came up that showed that Mr. Jackson had done something inappropriate or illegal, you would want to know about that, correct?
Yes.
And by the end of the conversation, neither you nor the other workers under your supervision had received any such information. Is that correct?
Yes.
Alright, now, you talked about telephone calls. Did you talk to Janet Arvizo, Janet Ventura? Did you talk to her at any time prior to the meeting on the 20th of February?
No.
So the first time you ever had any contact with her, she hugged you?
Yes.
Alright, after that interview was over, I take it you all said goodbye and you left and went back to your office, right?
Yes.
After that was over, did you have any further contact in any fashion with Janet Arvizo?
Yes, because we have a language form that you have to sign for our department, which means that the investigation took place in English for Mrs. Ventura, and that she understood the referral and everything that was read to her, and everything that was discussed with her was in English. And I took it back to her to have her sign that form.
Okay, now, you felt that she spoke perfect English or totally adequate English, is that correct?
Yes.
You were just being extra careful to make sure you had the file documented with the proper form, is that right?
The language form.
The language form.
Yes. They have to sign that.
And a person would have to sign it if you had reason to believe that English was not their first language, is that right?
Yes. The reverse side of it is Spanish.
Did you have any reason to believe that English was not Miss Arvizo's first language?
No.
You thought it might or might not have been her first language, but you should go make sure the form is signed, is that right?
Yes.
So did you go back and have her sign it?
Yes.
And when did that occur?
I'm not sure of the date, if it was the same day that I went to the home or the next day.
Okay, within a day anyway?
Yes.
And did you go to the same location, St. Andrew's Place?
Yes.
And did you talk to Miss Arvizo?
Yes. She came downstairs to sign the language form.
Okay, and did she sign the language form?
Yes.
Did she indicate in any way that she was under duress or there was any problem?
No.
Can you recall the conversation that you had at that time?
She wanted to know was there anything that we, meaning the department, I guess between Laverne. I'm sorry, Miss Peters, Miss Bowen and myself. If there was anything we could do in terms of possibly talking to Mr. Jackson's people about getting the boys homeschooled or to have a private tutor or put in a private school.
So did she indicate why she couldn't do that herself?
No.
Did she say anything about not having the money to do it or anything of that sort?
No.
Alright, and when she was talking to you about this, was it your understanding she was saying she wanted Mr. Jackson to pay for it?
Yes, because she wanted to know if we could talk to someone related to him.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Right. Someone related to him in terms of possibly getting those things done for the kids because of the media attention. She didn't feel that the boys were going to be able to go back to their middle school.
And she felt that Mr. Jackson should be providing the tutoring for her children?
Yes.
Alright, and did you tell her, sure, I'll be happy to call Mr. Jackson up and ask him?
No. I told her that, that was out of my scope of our investigation for the department and I wasn't able to do something like that.
Did she appear to be angry with Mr. Jackson?
No.
Alright, did you give her any, when you said out of your scope, did you give her any recommendations as to who she might go to?
No.
Did you tell her at that time she could go see a lawyer?
Your Honor, I'm going to object as leading.
Overruled. You may answer. You may answer.
Oh, no. I believe that in terms of the lawyer, it was because she said that she didn't sign a waiver for the Martin Bashir television show. That's where the attorney part of it came in. And that's when,
Alright, did you have that discussion with her in person at the time of the waiver?
No, at the time of do you mean at the time of the language form?
Yeah, I'm sorry. That's what I meant to say.
No, this was about the kids getting either homeschooling, a private tutor, or private school.
Now, was there anybody there with her when she was asking you if you could contact somebody on behalf of Mr. Jackson?
Somebody that worked for Mr. Jackson.
Was it the same person you saw the day before or earlier that day, depending on when this was?
I can't.
Was it the same gentleman you described, or somebody else?
I think it was somebody else.
And where was she when she was talking to you? You said she came out of the apartment.
Standing outside of my car.
Did you stay in your car or you got
Yes.
out of your car? What was her demeanor while she was talking to you?
She was fine. She just really wanted to know about getting the kids into another school or another situation. Because, she didn't feel they could go back to their school.
The situation. Did she also tell you that she wanted to have a different apartment or a different place to live?
I don't believe she could stay where she was staying before. And I don't know how long she had been staying at Mr. Jackson's residence, but the school where Gavin and Star went to school had Mr. Major Jackson's address as the address that the children lived at.
Your Honor, excuse me, I'm going to object as non-responsive to the question and move to strike.
Sustained. All strike it.
Did Janet Arvizo, when she was there, came up to your car to talk to you? Did she tell you anything about having, or ask you anything about having Mr. Jackson or his representatives take care of moving her to another location? Did she say anything about that?
Not that I can recall.
Alright, now, was the apartment that you saw, Major Jackson's apartment, was that really an adequate apartment for a man, a woman and 3 children to live?
Well, I'm going to object to that question, Your Honor. It's her conclusion. It's irrelevant.
Overruled. You may answer. Do you want the question read back?
Yes, please.
All right, now, was the apartment that you saw, Major Jackson's apartment, was that really an adequate apartment for a man, a woman and 3 children to live?
When you say adequate, because there are all types of living situations, especially in the nature of our business. So families live in one-room apartments, children sleep in a living room, children sleep in the bedroom, the parents sleep out on the couches. So I don't really feel, to say adequate, I mean.
Alright, So, adequate is not a good word is what you're telling me. That's fine. Let me change the question. Did you have an understanding from Janet Arvizo that she wanted to have a different place to live other than all of them living in Mr. Major Jackson's apartment?
No.
She never really discussed that with you.
No.
Object. The answer was, no. The next question would be leading and suggestive.
Okay, I'll withdraw it, then.
The answer to that one was, no, too.
I won't withdraw it if the answer is in. I'll submit it, Your Honor.
Next question.
All right. At any time did Janet Ventura tell you during this visit at your car that she was being held against her will?
No.
And I take it your prior contact with her on the 20th, the meeting all three of you had, she didn't indicate in any way she was being held against her will, is that right?
No.
I started to ask you about the other person that was there, and you said you thought there was another gentleman who was there. Did he come up to the window of the car with Miss Arvizo?
He came up afterwards and she introduced us, and I don't remember his name.
So while she was talking to you initially, he stayed back and let you talk?
Yes.
All right, and at some point she asked him to come up so she could introduce.
Yes.
Did she tell you this is somebody associated with Mr. Jackson?
Yes.
And what was his demeanor as he was introduced to you?
Fine.
Okay, pleasant?
Pleasant.
All right, did you notice any anxiety or any, let me strike the word, anxiety. Did you notice any tension between Miss Arvizo and the person who she said worked for Mr. Jackson?
No.
Now, you indicated that you got some telephone calls, or at least a telephone call. Did you receive more than one telephone call from Janet Arvizo?
Yes. After we had closed the referral, maybe I had a couple of them from her.
Okay, do you recall what she talked about during those telephone calls?
The same thing, in terms of getting Gavin and Star tutored, home-schooled, or private-schooled.
Okay, do you remember talking to Major J. Jackson at some point by telephone?
Yes, he was the last person that I spoke to pertaining to the case.
And what did he call to ask you about?
About schooling for the kids as well. And I told him that I wasn't able to get involved with that, or suggest that the kids be home-schooled, private-schooled, or tutored.
So between Janet Ventura and Major J. Jackson, did they appear to be trying to get you to use your office to get Mr. Jackson to come up with some money for their benefit?
Well, I think it was just more in terms of them wanting to have the kids not go back to their same school, and was there something that we could do about, and talk to somebody to see about them getting into a private school, home-schooled, or tutored.
Okay, now, when you're at the car and the fella came up, he's summoned up by Miss Ventura to meet you. Did you talk to him and say, well, it's nice to meet you. You work for Mr. Jackson, Michael Jackson. Could you do something to help these people out and get them some tutoring, and that sort of thing? Did you do that at all?
No, I believe that my conversation with him was very limited in terms of, hello. Nice to meet you, and I think that was pretty much it.
All right, at the time, at some point, did you receive a telephone call from the Santa Barbara Sheriff's Department, or did somebody on your staff receive a call?
I called the Santa Barbara Sheriff's Department when we got the referral.
Okay, let me clarify the question, because I'm asking about a call that came in after the interview took place. Do you recall a call coming to your department after the interview took place from somebody in the Santa Barbara Sheriff's Department?
Okay, you're not talking about prior to us going out.
No, after you went out.
After. After we had gone out, my assistant regional administrator, Brenda Blackburn, received a telephone call from the Santa Barbara Sheriff's Department asking that we.
Excuse me, I'm going to object to anything that is hearsay. Looks like that's where she's going.
Sustained.
So the answer, then, stops right there. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, that's fine. Without telling us what you heard from Miss Blackburn as to what the other person said, if anything, was the request relayed to you? Did Miss Blackburn?
Yes.
Without telling me what it was, did Miss Blackburn tell you what the person said?
Yes, and it was documented in our notes.
All right, and was that something you had ever heard of before?
No.
Okay, now, have you been contacted by police in an investigation where there's a concurrent investigation?
Yes.
And in the course of your experience, have police agreed or asked to come with you on investigations?
We share information with them pertaining to our investigation, and they share information with us pertaining to their investigation.
And in your experience as a supervisor in that office, have you ever heard of the police or sheriff telling you not to interview a family that was a subject of an investigation?
No, because I had called to the sheriff.
Before we get,
I'm sorry.
we have to just
I'm sorry.
keep it. That's okay. I think we have to keep it question and answer so we know we're going to follow the ruling here. So you talked to Janet Arvizo, then, in person on the 20th, right?
Yes.
In person again either the 20th or the 21st, correct?
Yes.
And then you talked to her by telephone at least 2 times thereafter.
Yes.
Is that correct? And you also talked to Major J. Jackson sometime thereafter?
Yes.
Do you recall the date of the last phone call that you received?
No.
Roughly how long was it after February 20th?
Maybe a month, 6 weeks.
Alright, now, during that entire period of time, did Janet Ventura Arvizo ever tell you that she was being held against her will?
No.
Did she ever tell you that any member of her family had been treated in an inappropriate or illegal fashion by Mr. Jackson or anybody associated with him?
No.
And when Major J. Jackson talked to you, did he indicate to you in any way that anything illegal or inappropriate had happened with regard to the Arvizo family?
No.
Thank you. No further questions. You know, I do, actually. And I apologize. Let me just do this. Did you have occasion? Are those the only times that you saw the Arvizos, or was there another occasion?
There was another occasion.
Okay, was that at Fatburger?
Yes.
And you weren't having a Fatburger when you went there. You were having a turkey burger. Is that right? That sounds better. Can you just tell us about the encounter that you had at Fatburger?
Miss Peters, Miss Bowen and myself went to lunch together. And, maybe towards the end of March or the beginning of April, and we were going to Fatburgers. And we ran into Miss Arvizo, Gavin and Star.
Okay, and, now, was this before the telephone calls stopped, or was it in the middle of that period, or what would you say?
After the telephone calls.
So after the telephone, this is a chance encounter that occurred after you had already had the telephone calls, is that right?
Yes.
Alright, and at that time, what did Janet Arvizo tell you, if anything, about what was happening in her life?
She said that Mr. Jackson wanted them to go to Brazil, that they weren't going to Brazil, and the kids, Gavin, Star, had not been homeschooled or tutored or in a private school, and actually they were going upstairs to the tutoring service. Gavin and Star were going to the tutoring service upstairs in the kind of, strip mall area.
There's some private tutor up there?
And that.
You mentioned Brazil. Did she indicate why? What the purpose of the trip to Brazil was?
No.
Did she say anything about the media?
Your Honor, I'm going to object as leading and suggestive.
Overruled.
Did she say anything about the media?
No.
Alright, now, how was the demeanor? What was her demeanor during this conversation?
She seemed to be fine. Both of the boys seemed to be fine. They said they were going to tutoring because they had missed a lot of school. And I believe she told Miss Peters and I that Major Jackson was paying for the boys to be tutored.
Alright, and did she indicate in any way that anything illegal or inappropriate had happened with regard to Mr. Michael Jackson or anybody associated with him?
No.
Alright, good. Now I have no further questions.
Alright, we'll take our break now.